NATO will not intervene in Ukraine. America has sent, just recently as last week, almost $300 million in humanitarian supplies. That means money to help Ukraine fight back Russia. But America cannot put troops on the ground in Ukraine. This becomes very, very important in the eyes of Putin, because NATO for the last 25 years has been trying to entrench or endraft Ukraine into NATO. Putin has strongly opposed that for a couple of reasons. Russia and Ukraine, these two neighbors that was once alliance under the USSR. If Ukraine becomes a part of NATO, then Ukraine becomes a military base for NATO. That means that NATO can put military operations in Ukraine, which is directly across the border from Russia. That makes Russia very, very vulnerable. Welcome to Studio B, everybody. I am your host, Pastor MDH. Thank you so very much for joining us here on the set today. Again, we thank you so very much for all that you do in and through this podcast. We pray that every time that you watch this, that you come away more informed, more empowered in the issues that we are talking about to bring education and knowledge to the people. Today, we're going to do part 2 of what we started last week in regards to this conflict that is going on in Eastern Europe. I want to read a couple of things for you really quickly. This is some serious stuff, and we're getting into uncharted territory, and it's going to affect us all sooner rather than later. Stocks are continuing to fall in the midst of U.S. getting more deeply involved in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Stock futures sink, oil soars amid Russia's war in Ukraine. The Dow drops 200 points just yesterday. This morning, Shell is to stop buying Russian crude oil. This is going to be a big deal. As of yesterday, America was still importing 10% of its oil from Russia, as of yesterday. But Shell has now just decided to stop buying crude oil from Russia. This is going to have major impact in America. But I want to ask you something today. Could this war in Ukraine, could it have been avoided? I will say unequivocally, yes. Last week, I talked about the role of NATO. NATO, the big player on the scene right now. But I want to make a declaration to you that because America is so deeply entrenched in all the world's affairs, nothing happens on the global stage unless it first comes through America. Make no mistake about it, America has its tentacles in every single nation on the planet. Nothing happens unless it first comes by America. America is a global and dominant superpower. Economically, militarily, we are a dominant force on the world stage. And whatever happens globally first comes through America. I'm going to show you a couple things that you need to know. Could this have been avoided? Yes. And let me give you one way that it could have been avoided. It is highly, highly, highly unlikely that Ukraine will ever join NATO. They've been trying to get in NATO for the last 30 years. It is highly, highly unlikely that Ukraine will ever be a part of the NATO alliance. Everybody in NATO, the 30 countries in NATO, including the big stick called America, knows that. Could this war have been completely avoided? Yes, with one declaration. All America had to do, all President Biden had to do, all the NATO alliances had to do was just to guarantee that Ukraine would have never joined the NATO alliance. That's all they would have had to do. That's all they would have had to do, is say Ukraine is never going to be a part of the NATO alliance, which they are never going to be a part of the NATO alliance. The sole reason why he invaded, and I'm gonna get to this in just a second, was something that happened a week before he invaded. But all we got to do is just come in and say, Ukraine is never going to be a part of the NATO alliance. This whole thing that's going on right now in Eastern Europe, where 2,500 civilians have been killed, could have been avoided. And I'm going to give you evidence to prove that. It is simply with one swipe of his pen, one speak of his tongue to say, listen, Ukraine is never going to be a part of NATO, which everybody knows they will never be a part of NATO. They could have completely avoided this. But here's why. Here's why. And this is important. Hold on. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I am... Okay, there we go. Because I don't want to misspeak here. I've got all this stuff written down. I want to make sure that I give it to you as clearly as possible. One of the reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine, well, let me back up. A week before President Putin invaded Ukraine, President Joe Biden sent our Vice President Kamala Harris over to Munich for the European Security Council. And in that European Security Council meeting, here is what Vice President Kamala Harris said, and I quote, "I appreciate and admire President Zelensky, that's the president of Ukraine, desire to join NATO," end quote. Okay, so President Biden, 7 days before Russia invaded Ukraine, sent Vice President Harris to Germany, to Munich, for the European Security Council. And she said, and I quote, "I appreciate and admire President Zelensky's desire to join NATO." 6 days after that meeting and that quote, Russia invades Ukraine. 6 days after. 6 days after that major thing that happened in Munich, Russia invades Ukraine. Now, people say, well, what's the big deal? What's the big deal of Ukraine joining NATO in regards to Russia's eyes? Well, I'll tell you, if Ukraine joins the NATO alliance, then the NATO alliance and all 30 countries, including America, will set military bases in Ukraine. They will be able to set up shop in Ukraine, right next door to Russia. I want to ask, because, I took a lot of heat from this last year and the year before. I just want to ask this, and I want to ask this in a spirit of transparency, in a spirit of humility, but I really want to ask this, because I got a lot of heat for my political views in 2020, 2021, because President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris was hailed to the American public as the saviors of America. He came in with the Build Back Better plan. Now, I want to ask you a question, sincerely. How much better are you? How much better are you financially? We are getting ready. No, I'm going to get to this in just a second. We have just entered into a Cold War with Russia. Yesterday, Secretary of State Blinken came on CBS this morning and said that the U.S. is going to use Poland as a cutout section to send fighter jets into Ukraine. The Secretary of State just said that on Sunday, that they're going to use Poland to get fighter jets, F-16s, into Ukraine. That is a military escalation of war. We're going to send fighter jets from America into Ukraine to fight with Ukraine, even though Ukraine is not a part of NATO? Why are we sending any type of military personnel to Ukraine? Ukraine is not a part of NATO. That's the NATO alliance that was formed back in 1949, that if anybody attacks a NATO alliance, then all the alliance gets involved in it. Why is the Secretary of State saying that we're going to use Poland, which is a part of NATO, as a backdoor to send F-16s into Ukraine? This is an escalation of war. Now, everybody, I want you to hear this. I mean, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm asking, where are the people that said this was all going to get better? I want you to tell me how you explain a 7.25 inflation rate. I want you to tell me how everything, and don't talk about the gas prices right now. Your gas prices have been going up for the last year. Not just within the last 2 weeks, not just in the last couple of weeks since they've invaded Ukraine. Your gas prices have been going up for the last year, and gas prices are a direct result to energy policy. Nothing more, nothing less. It is about oil production. That is all it is about. So when you shut down 27% of the U.S. oil reserves on day number 1 by executive order, guess what happens to the gas prices in America? They begin to go up. Well, what happens when gas prices goes up, Pastor Holman? Everything goes up. Because if it costs more for the truckers to put it in their trucks and drive down I-10 and drive down 45 to deliver it to Walmart and to H-E-B, if it costs them more to get it to Walmart and H-E-B, then H-E-B and Walmart have got to subsidize that cost on their end. When gas prices go up, everything goes up. Everything goes up. And if you are an economist, one of the ways in which you gauge a future recession is by gas prices. It's by gas prices. And those of us in the financial industry that understand these kind of ebbs and flows, one of the things that we look at is gas prices. Those are called consumer economics. I'm not talking about millionaire, billionaire stuff. I'm talking about the middle class, which is responsible for the progress of America. But middle class is hurting right now tremendously. And I want you to tell me, I want you to look at your stocks. I want you to look at your investments. I want you to look at your 401k. I want you to look at your 403. I want you to look at your 529. I want you to look at all of those things. I want you to tell me what your finances are doing right now as you're watching your stocks, as you're watching your retirement, as you're watching it. We're entering into a war not with Afghanistan, not with somebody that can't do anything to us. We're not worried about Afghanistan. Nobody was worried about, Iraq. Nobody's worried about those places. And God bless them, but we're not worried about them taking us out on a military scale because they don't have anything that could affect us. But we are literally have just entered into the Cold War for the second time with Russia, a nation that has nuclear capabilities just as America does. This is not some backwoods country that we can just go in and dominate at will. We can't do that. But now we're getting ready to send fighter jets into a neighboring NATO country, Poland, to fight in Ukraine against Russia. That is a major escalation on the world stage, and it just happened Sunday. And I'm not making this stuff up. Secretary of State Tony Blinken just said it. He's the one that said it. We're going through Poland in order to fight in Ukraine. American fighters, to which President Joe Biden said in the State of the Union on last whatever that was, we are not sending American troops into Ukraine. Because that is a war between Ukraine and Russia, and America will have no part in it. State of the Union address, he just said it. Now on Sunday, a few days after the State of the Union, we say we are sending military personnel into these particular countries. Now, what is this going to do? What is this going to do? I told you last week, when you're looking at the cyclical markets, that Ecclesiastes chapter number 3 says that there is nothing new under the sun. So in 1918 to 1920, We had an outbreak of a disease that killed 2 million plus people. 1929 to 1933, we had the Great Depression where the markets crashed. In 1939, we had World War II. So we had outbreak, we had market crash, we had war. Outbreak, market crash, war. We're coming off of COVID-19 here in America and around the world. Our markets have been struggling to recover. And any economist that is worth its salt is telling you and telling us that a recession is on the way, just around the corner. It's coming. So what do you need to do in order to jumpstart an economy and to get it out of that state of disarray very quickly? War. War produces money. War produces money. War produces money. War produces money. So what's going on over there in the Ukraine is going to affect us, as I have been saying on this set for the last 2 months. In Houston right now, I'm paying $4.40 a gallon. It will be $5 a gallon by April. And in Houston, Texas, in the South, in the southern parts of United States of America, not the West Coast, not the East Coast, but in the South, which is always the last part of the country to feel economic strain. The South, because we don't have state income tax. We are the last people to feel economic impact in the South. If we're getting $5 a gallon in the South, in Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, it is really bad. And make no mistake about it, by summertime, you will see $6 a gallon in Houston, Texas. You will see it. Because if Shell is now prohibiting their gas from Russia, that means they got to get it from another source. Germany, which gets 50% of its energy from Russia, to which America gets 10% of its energy from Germany. Don't tell me that the world is not interconnected. It is all interconnected. So if they're not going to get it from Russia right now, they got to go through a secondary and third source. Well, those third sources and second and third choices are going to raise the price of the crude oil. It's going to raise it exponentially. So when you're talking about grass on the ground stuff that's happening, it's going to affect us. It's going to affect us. But I want you to understand something. This is one of the things that I just have, I was talking to a good Christian friend of mine, and, we was talking about this, and here was his response, God will provide. Everybody, I know God's going to provide. I know that God is Jehovah Rapha. I know that God gives me protection and provision. I'm never going to sleep outside. No matter how high the gas prices are going to go, God's going to be able to put gas in my tank. I believe that with every fiber of my being. I don't need you to say that to me. That's not anything towards God. I believe that. I believe that. But that's pulling the ripcord because you don't have an argument to stand on about why these prices in real time for average everyday Americans are hurting their pockets and affecting every aspect of their lives. Yes, I know God will provide for the Christian. We know that. But there are some non-Christians out there that are equally struggling. They can't get to the gas tank, and now what took $30 or what took $40 to fill up is now taking $75, $80. And when it's all said and done, going to take $100 to fill up a Hyundai? How is that helping the average everyday American? And this is where I try to get people to understand, because we don't live in that hemisphere. We don't live in that stratosphere. The people that are making the money are not concerned about gas prices. They're not concerned about it because they have a storehouse of wealth. The people that are in the U.S. representatives and the House and the Senate and White House, these are people that are getting paid by the government. We literally pay their entire living expense. They're not worried about these gas prices. Millionaires and billionaires, they're not worried about gas prices. But average, everyday American folk, the people in the middle, the one that makes America run, those people are hurting. I'm declaring to you that it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Because now we have just entered into a Cold War. The one that took us almost 20 years to get out of, same one that Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, let this wall fall. The Cold War between America and Russia has now just been reinstituted. And make no mistake about it, Ukraine is just a pawn in all of this. They happen to be in the middle of all of this. The two major superpowers that are on the world stage right now are Russia and America, the same ones from the 1940s. Everybody else is just casual players in this whole thing playing out on the world stage. The only difference between now and 1949 was that now we got cameras everywhere. You're able to see it real time. This stuff is going to affect us. It's going to affect us. And so when I bring forth stuff like, okay, let's peel back the layers. Let's ask ourselves some questions. Why wouldn't America just say, listen, Ukraine, you've been trying to get in here for 25 years. You're not going to get into NATO. Signed, sealed, and delivered. It's done. Why not just say it? Everybody knows it. All of the 30 members of NATO know it. Because if it was going to happen, it would have happened long before tonight or long before today. So why not just say it? Well, that begs the question, why not to say it? Well, here's why they don't want to say it. Because secretly, they want the war. Now, we got people in Ukraine, 18 and up, walking around with AK-47s. 44 million plus people. 1.5 million refugees just to this taping of this podcast right now. 1.5 million of them. 2,500 civilians. They've already taken over one nuclear plant in Ukraine, and now they got their eyes on the second one. This is happening right here under your nose. While we're sitting around talking about everything that don't matter, stuff that do matter, that is affecting us, we ain't paying no attention to it. You make no mistake about this, foreign policy does matter. And one of the things that I have against America is America always feels like it's got to be the big brother to everybody else in the world. We've got to help everybody. We've got to send our troops, our young men into war for wars that have nothing to do with us, have nothing to do with our sovereignty, have nothing to do with what's going on in the borders of our country. But we feel as though we are the world police. But we're very, very subject to how we are the world's police. You notice that we didn't send any people down to Haiti. We can send a group of Marines and a group of military people, personnel down to Haiti and stabilize that country right now and return it back to democracy. In a minute, we could do that. But Haiti benefits America nothing. So while that country is literally burning itself down today, 2 hours away from America, we can send personnel to Haiti to stabilize it, to wipe out all the gangs that are trying to take over political control, wipe them all out and return it back to a sense of democracy and put it back in the hands of the people that love Haiti. We haven't gone 2 hours down to Haiti, but here we are going to use Poland in Eastern Europe that borders the Black Sea, send F-16s and fighter jets to fight in Ukraine. Now, let me show you what's going to happen. Right now, you have Ukraine and you have Crimea. Russia has Crimea and it has Georgia. Crimea is the port that goes into Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is a huge agricultural center for the world. How do they get their agriculture out of Ukraine? By way of the Black Sea. By way of the Black Sea. So if the port is cut off by way of the Black Sea, then none of the agricultural goods in Ukraine get to the rest of the world. So everybody is affected. The port that has been open for 60 years will now all of a sudden be shut down, and all of those goods and services that came out of Ukraine will be shut down in an instant. When we send U.S. fighter jets to escalate a war that has nothing to do with us. When America, the superpower, the big brother of the world, could have stopped this before it ever started. Now, do you realize that, and I find this very, very interesting, y'all. Y'all got to just walk with me. Putin has been in office since 1997. That's almost 25 years. Why now? He didn't take Ukraine during Obama, in the 8 years of Obama. He didn't take Ukraine for the 4 years of Trump. But in the first year of President Biden, he takes Ukraine? And he's been there for 25 years? He's had the same nuclear weapons. He's had those since 1996. When Ukraine handed their nuclear weapons over to Russia as a part of that agreement for the peace talks. So he's had nuclear capability since 1996. But why now? Why now? Why go into Ukraine now when the whole world is watching? America's got his hands dirty in this. America's got his hands dirty in this because we have alternate reasons for being involved in this Cold War. How do I know that? Okay. In 2017, Congressman Eric Swalwell, a congressman out of California, said this in 2017: we must get NATO to expand its role in Eastern Europe by allowing Ukraine to enter into NATO so that we can press Vladimir Putin. That's a congressman in 2017 that's saying we got to get Ukraine into NATO so that we can press Vladimir Putin. For what reason? 2017, for what reason? Now, here we are 5 years later, and the same song is being played over and over and over again. 5 years after the fact, Ukraine is still not a part of NATO because everybody knows Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. I'm asking people who are clear and concise people. Let me back up. Let me back up. I consider myself to be a very, sometimes even to my detriment, a very reasonable. I don't make rash decisions. Sometimes I get overly complicated and dig real deep because I want to try to know all the aspects of it. Sometimes that works to my detriment. But I'm not a rash person. I'm not a emotional person. I mean, I have emotions. Don't get me wrong. I got a wife and 3 daughters. I got emotions, but my emotions don't rule me because I know that emotions are terribly unreliable. What you may feel today, you're not going to feel tomorrow. So why make major life decisions on something that you feel today? Why not just calm down, think it through, allow some time to sit on it, and then make the decision because your emotions are going to change. So I'm not an overly emotional person. So when I feel emotions begin to start taking over me, I like to get to a place of calmness where I can begin to start thinking about things. And for the last few years in our country, people have just been overly emotional. They have been making very emotional decisions without any grounds or basis, just highly emotionally charged conversations, debates, and or decisions that didn't make any sense other than the fact that they were emotional. And so what I've been trying to say for the life of me, especially as a Christian, especially as one that looks at the Bible and declares it to be true, I want to be able to make a decision that is going to benefit my life, that I'm not going to live to regret tomorrow. Now, is that a perfect formula? No, of course not. Of course not. 25 years into my faith, I'm still making decisions at times that I regret. But I try to minimize those things. I try to minimize them, and I try to bring to the point to where it has people to say, okay, let's talk about this in a reasonable way, and let's talk about facts, not how you feel. Not how you feel. Let's talk about the facts, because the facts don't care who you are. The facts don't care who I am. Facts matter, and they trump everything. So let's talk about the facts. Let's get away from your red party, your blue party. Let's get away from your party affiliation over here and your party affiliation over there. Let's get away from where you went to school, where you didn't go to school, how much money you got, how much money you don't have. Let's just talk about the facts. Even ad nauseum, I've been trying to do this. And when I looked at the 2020 presidential elections, I made decisions in those elections that I felt were going to benefit me and my family. I am concerned about what's going on in Eastern Europe. I really am. And I'm not trying to sound the alarm. I'm not trying to tell you to go out there and hunker down in your basement and, buy up all the toilet paper and all of the paper towels at Kroger. I'm not telling you to do that. That's foolishness. But I am concerned. I am concerned. I do not believe that the end is here. I do not believe that, this over there in Eastern Europe is going to cause the end of the world. I'm not on that level at all. I do not advocate that. But I am concerned about what it means to America. And I'm talking about in very, very practical ways. I'm talking about in very, very practical ways. Because if you look at the life that you're living right now and the mistakes that you have made, as you sit back and look at some of those decisions, you ask yourself, well, that could have been avoided. If you're a reasonable person and you look back at your life and that's something that happened in your life that you were not particularly proud of, as you sit and reflect on it, you say to yourself, man, I could have done something better in that moment. I could have made a different decision in that moment that would have gotten me a different outcome. That's what I'm talking about with this. I believe that innocent people are dying needlessly. Needlessly. We got people that don't like us as Americans from all around the world. People that if they could would blow America up at a moment's notice. But they know not to mess with us because we got capabilities to wipe you off the map. So we have deterrence for anybody that wants to come over here and do harm to us. As we protect our borders and what's going on in the United States of America, as America is strong, so is the rest of the world strong. But when America is fighting other people's wars while wars are waging within its own borders, it weakens the nation and causes unnecessary hurt, harm, and danger, as what you are seeing here in Eastern Europe. And there is no end in sight. There is no end in sight. Just recently as last night, they added another 10 miles to the Russian convoy that is outside of the city of Kyiv, which is the Ukrainian capital. God bless Brother President Zelensky, who went back to the capital in Kyiv yesterday and did an address from his presidential office. He said, if my country is gonna fall, I'm gonna fall with my country. I appreciate that kind of leadership. I appreciate that he wasn't in a suit. He was in his camos. He was ready to get on the ground and work with his people. I love that guy. He's doing a great job. But I believe that President Zelensky is suffering unnecessarily. And the people of his, now hear this, Ukraine is not a backwoods nation. It is not a third world country. It is an industrialized nation. All of the things that you would find in America, you'll find in Ukraine. The same luxuries of life. Air-conditioned carpet, beautiful cars, beautiful homes, educated people. You got the lower class, the middle class, and the upper class. It is an industrialized nation. It is not some backwoods, nation in the mountains, with dirt everywhere. It is an industrialized nation. This industrialized nation has now been cast onto the world scene where many people are hurting unnecessarily. See, when I was thinking about this on the way in, people say, they talk bad about conspiracy theorists. But conspiracy is actually a measure of law. Like, you can be convicted in the court of law on conspiracy. It's a measure of law. What we don't think about, because we consider that to be the movies and that's too extreme, is that there are people out there with world domination. Like, this little part of my life, I'm not satisfied with that. I want all of this. There are people out there with global agendas. And those of us who live in the real world that are just going to work, trying to come home, do the best we can, feed our family, take care of ourselves, do our work, keep our head down. Those of us who live in that world, we don't understand that stratosphere of those elites that are looking for world domination, like the world. But they're out there. And world domination always comes at a cost. And those who are ushering in world domination don't care about the peons at the bottom that is getting the world domination. They don't care about those people at the bottom that are dying. They don't care about when you and I have to spend an additional $50, $75 at the gas pump. That makes no difference to them because they've already got it. I was looking, I'll share the website where you can go and look at all the investments that our elected leaders do. So as an elected leader in the United States of America, you got to make that public information. You got to publicize where you are making investments. They're trying to cut down on, insider trading and, lobbying and things of that nature. So there's a website that shows every single elected official, if they are invested in the market, if they're invested in stocks or funds, there is public information about where these people are allocated to and to the degree that they are allocated in those particular investments. Nancy Pelosi is worth $375 million. $375 million. $375 million. She has been called the savviest of all investors. Watch this word, in history. And I've looked at Nancy Pelosi and her investment habits for about 3 years now. She is a very, very, very savvy investor. And if I had the money as Nancy Pelosi, wherever I see her investing, I would invest in that same stock. But I don't have that kind of money to invest those kind of shares in dough in that kind of funds in which she puts her money in. Because I can't buy, 1 million shares or 200,000 shares or 50,000 shares. Not at this point, at least. But when you're able to see what they're putting their money in, it's very interesting about where they're putting their money in and what these particular companies do. What these particular companies do that are elected officials on the Democrat side and on the Republican side, where they're putting their money in and what these companies actually do. It's very, very interesting. I'll put a link up here in the website on the podcast for you to go and look at that website so that you can track it for yourself. Because while we are struggling, there are people around the world who are getting richer. And as you look at what's going on with this Ukrainian and Russia conflict, again, I'm trying to measure my words and stick to these notes that I got. If you can see these notes that I got on my screen, I'm trying to stick to these notes because I don't want to cause panic. So I want to say precisely what I have studied and precisely what I've written down. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And even though the war is not waging within the United States, this war will get to the United States in ways that are going to hurt average, everyday Americans. And it's a real issue. So when you're looking at policy, when you're looking at, okay, we did this, well, by doing this, what happened? So when I was watching the State of the Union, I called some of my good friends, right after. And we had some very, very, I praise God for the friends that I got, man. Praise God for you guys. But I had some really, really good friends that we're able to have real good conversation about. So as I watched the State of the Union, I heard our president say, President Joseph Biden say that the plan is not to defund the police, but to fund the police. That's what he said during his State of the Union. As I called a couple of friends of mine, I asked them about what they thought of that statement. And one of them said, I'm glad he cleared that up because that was foolishness. Another one said, well, a simple Google search is going to show you that that was not true. So here we are in the State of the Union, and we say the answer to policing is not to defund them, but to fund them. The solution that I have been saying all along, like, why in the world would you defund the police? It's going to hurt minority communities much more than it will hurt affluent community. It's going to hurt the hood rather than it's going to hurt Bel Air and River Oaks. But in 2020, we were painting defund the police on the streets of Los Angeles, Detroit, Minneapolis, Chicago, all along the streets of America. We had defund the police on voting ballots in major metropolitan cities. We were taking over city blocks in major metropolitan cities. And we're calling not just for the defunding of police, but for the complete dismantling of police. I'll include a link in this podcast and show you all of that. But now, because that was never an option, anybody with any sense knows not to defund or dismantle the police department, but it was to facilitate a little few in order to get something done. And now that the something is done, I'm going back and telling you that's a bad idea. He also said, I got it right here, that we're going to secure the American borders. He stayed on the American borders for 16 seconds, doing an hour and 6-minute speech. 16 seconds he left, he expounded on securing American borders. In 2021, 2.1 million illegal immigrants came across our border. In 2021, 2.1 million came across our borders. Now watch this. This was during a time when COVID vaccines were mandated for all Americans. Lest you lose your job, lest you not be able to go into a restaurant, lest you not be able to go and work out, lest you will not be able to go into a movie theater. Mandates, the vaccine mandates were given to American citizens, but 2.1 million illegal immigrants were allowed to come into this country completely unvaccinated. How do you know this, Pastor Holman? Because they were putting them on buses, putting them on planes, and dropping them off in major U.S. cities. The census data said that Houston, Texas received 65,000 of those immigrants in the city of Houston last year alone. Now, we were forced as American citizens, mandated to get vaccinated. But 2.1 million people came across our borders that were not mandated to be vaccinated. They were allowed to come in, jump on buses, jump on planes, and be dropped off in all these major metropolitan cities, many of which with no record keeping at all. I'm gonna have our team put a video up here in Newark, New Jersey, at 3:00 in the morning. A large charter plane. This man that taped this video has since been fired. He is now suing his employer for whistleblower status, where he taped the entire thing. where almost 125 illegal immigrants got off a plane, jumped into 6 buses, and went in different directions. That's happening right now. This is during the State of the Union, to which he spent just a matter of seconds on. So when I'm talking about this whole war, listen, I don't care who. Choices matter. Now, I believe that all politicians are in it for themselves. Maybe I shouldn't feel that way, but it's hard for me to think that a person spends $10 million to get elected into an office that pays you $400,000 a year. That doesn't seem like a very worthy investment. So after 4 years, you're going to make $1.6 million in a position that took you $10 million to $20 million to get into. But when you get into high levels of position where you have influence, you got to take care of the people that got you to those places. And I'm saying that in America right now, with this whole thing going on in Russia and Ukraine, this stuff is going to spill off into our streets, not in a war sense, not in a war. Not in a war. I don't believe it's going to happen in a war, because there's 86 million people in America who are registered gun owners. I don't believe that it's going to spill off into a war in our streets, but I believe the political ramifications of this are going to be felt for the next couple of years. And this is one of the things we talked about last year, about making sure that your money was right. Making sure that you were taking care of them Benjamins that were coming into your hands. Because there was going to come a time that those Benjamins coming into your hand were not going to be as valuable as they once were. Here we are. And it's going to get worse. I wish I can say that there's some financial relief around the corner. Stimulus packages are not going out again, ever. They're done. Kaput. It's dead. Put it in a coffin, put it in the grave. It's done. No more free money. Now what's happening about that free money is we've got to replenish all of that free money that we gave out. So now we got to do things. And the Fed has said they're not going to increase interest rates, which will be a absolute influx into the American economy to boost it, to offset some of these other costs that we have. They said they're not going to do that. So there's no relief coming from the Fed. There's no more stimulus checks being, randomly put in your accounts. There's not going to be any more stimulus packages of $3.1 trillion that are passed by our government. Those days are gone. Now, everybody, it's time to pay the piper. It's time to pay the piper, because as I told you last year, ain't nothing in life free. Ain't nothing in life free. There's always coming a time to where you're going to have to pay. And now here we are. Make no mistake about it, about the American economy. And I'm talking now as a person that has spent a number of years in finance. Numbers are very reliable. They're very reliable. Very reliable. The American economy is a robust economy. It is built on the capitalism structure, that goods and services are sold by individuals with those goods and services to anybody that can buy those goods and services. That's capitalism, okay? That's not socialism. That's not communism. That's capitalism that says if this person has a product and or a service that he is able to market to somebody that will buy that good and service, they're able to pay him, he gives them the good and services, then both lives are equally balanced. That's capitalism. So America is built on a robust system called capitalism. It is what has allowed us to get through wars, depressions, recessions, presidential assassinations, our economy, 9/11. So look at some of the most severe things that have happened in our history, and our economy, although it may have gotten fractured, bounced back because of this thing called capitalism in America. But not everybody likes capitalism. Not everybody likes capitalism. And our market here in America affects the world market. So when you see gas prices shooting up, I have a picture here on my phone. Let me make sure that I say this to you correctly. Okay, I took this picture on Saturday at 10:22 when I filled up my wife's Tahoe. It was 413.9. Now that's a Supreme. The regular was 353.9. That was on Saturday. Saturday just passed at 10:22 a.m. That when I filled up my wife's truck. I go back on Sunday at 8:51 p.m. Supreme is now $4.39 a gallon, and regular is now $3.79 a gallon. It went up 26 cents in one day. In one day, 26 cents in one day. How is that even possible? I'm gonna give you another one. This picture here is from February the 12th at 9:38 a.m. Gas prices were $2.89.9. Premium was $3.46.9. That's on February the 12th at 9:38 a.m. Got another one for you. Go all the way back to September the 6th, 1:15 p.m. Gas prices $2.61 per gallon. We are now up to $4 a gallon in Houston, Texas. Had a good friend of mine that lives in Los Angeles, or lives on the outskirts of Los Angeles actually, sent me a picture of his gas prices yesterday, $8.45. Listen, we're making jokes here in the studio, but ain't no place worth going to where I got to spend $8.46 a gallon to fill up my truck. That is absolutely insane. $8.45? That is insane. And when you're looking at a recession, one of the markers of recession is gas prices. Because what do people start to do in a recession? What starts a recession? People start holding their money. So they're not going out to the ball game. They're not going to the mall. They're not going to buy new shoes. They're not going to buy another car. They're holding their money. That's what precedes a recession. Money stops flowing in a recession. What happens when money stops flowing? Markets begin to be affected. What happens when markets get affected? Markets begin to crash. All because people are saying, I got to spend an extra $50 here, so I can't spend that $50 here over there. Because there's something more important for my $50. That is what precedes a recession. So when you go to HEB right now and you see that milk is $5 a gallon, eggs are $2.40 a gallon. Do you remember when you can get eggs for 99 cents? This isn't the stuff that we're eating. I'm not talking about going out to a fancy restaurant or anything like that, even though those costs are going up too. I'm talking about that this is being affected in everyday lives. And again, I'm not talking about those who are living in River Oaks, Bel Air, and high-fluent places. I'm not talking about those people. They're not concerned about that. But for the average everyday American, to the person that is watching this right now on the other side of that camera, to the person that is trying to do right, the one that is trying to put food on the table, the one that is trying to put their kids through school, the one that is trying to make sure that the bills are paid, those people, I want you to look at everything in your life right now that has a dollar sign attached to it. Everything that you're buying right now is more expensive. Everything. And it's hurting. Now, let me tell you, for those in the church, it's going to start to affect houses of worship. It's going to start affecting houses of worship. Giving is going to begin to start to wane, because money is not going to be as readily available as it once was. Your dollar is not worth the same that it was a year and a half ago. It is just not. That's just facts. Inflation just went up. Now, it was at 7.25 as recently as 2 weeks ago. It is now up to 7.28. Inflation is not going down. Inflation is going up. So the value of the dollar is going down while the price of goods and services are going up. Do you understand the problem that we are facing? You got the same $100, but your $100 are not buying what your $100 used to buy. Therefore, you have to get less for that same $100, which affects everybody in your family. That is what brings on a recession. That's what brings on the crash. Now watch this, because we are so invested in outside entities, because of America's creeping involvement inside of this war between Russia and Ukraine, the international markets are responding. The international markets are responding. In China, in Great Britain, okay, our money was already devalued in the UK with the British pound. It's going even lower now. World markets are now getting ready to switch to euro. And I went into this whole long diatribe about Muammar Gaddafi and how America assassinated this man because he took his oil reserves from the American dollar to the euro to gold reserves, and how he was trying to centralize all of the Western African countries into the Central Bank of Africa and got killed for it. And now Libya is an ISIS state. It's a failed state. But all of this starts with the almighty dollar. Like, money is a big tool. And while it's taking more for us, the ones who are benefiting from it taking more from us are not being affected at all. So I want to encourage you. With a couple of things here, okay? I don't believe that this is coming to a crescendo in World War III. I don't say that I don't believe it. If America puts boots on the ground in Ukraine, I'm not very encouraged. But I believe that would be a detrimental response to put U.S. troops on the ground in the middle of this Russia-Ukrainian conflict. I believe that would be detrimental. And I believe that would be detrimental to a lot of people, not just the soldiers on the ground. So I pray in Jesus' name, as I went into my prayer time last night, as I pray for the people of Russia and pray for the people of Ukraine, I am praying that God would touch the heart of these leaders and really have them to make better and wiser decisions, because these decisions affect millions of people. I am asking, not that anybody of any consequence may be watching that can, stroke a pen or make any policy decision. I'm not of anything like that, but please don't send American troops into Ukraine. Please don't do that. Please don't send American troops into the bullseye, into the hornet's nest in this Ukrainian-Russia conflict. It will not be good for America. It would not be good for the citizens of America, and it wouldn't be good for the world powers at large. All of this could have been avoided by simply telling Ukraine, you're not going to get into NATO. Now remember, Ukraine gave up all of its nuclear weapons in 1996, during the Minsk Accords. So they have no nuclear power. They have no nuclear deterrent. Now, if we start sending F-16s and Stingers and all of these things over here into Ukraine and putting American troops in those particular, planes and having people on the ground, it's going to escalate it to a degree that I don't believe that we're ready for. Again, this is not fighting Afghanistan or Iraq or Saddam Hussein. It's not fighting, Al-Qaeda. It's not doing that. These are superpowers that we're talking about. superpowers that we are talking about. So in Jesus' name, I know that as I go to during the next couple of days, we're talking about, I'm going to be sitting on a panel about financial responses to this world crisis, about what we can do financially to, not get swallowed up. And even though I know recessions are started because people hold their money, I am telling you to make wise financial decisions. Okay? You don't need to buy what you don't need. Make wise financial decisions. Because that $10 that you may spend over there that may seem insignificant, or, $50 over here, $100 over there, I'm not telling you not to spend it. It's your money. You do whatever you want to with it. I'm just asking you to ask yourself, do I really need this $100 X, Y, and Z? Because your dollar is going to shrink a little bit more. And I pray in Jesus' name that God gives us some relief. And so, everybody, I want you to do a couple things as we bring this to a close. I want you to do a couple things as we bring this to a close. This coming Friday and Saturday here at the Church of Bethel's Family, you may not be a part of the Church of Bethel's Family, but those who are, we have a prayer summit coming up on this Friday and this Saturday. And this Friday and Saturday, we will be invoking prayer, and we will be joining hands with brothers and sisters to pray over this world, to pray over this nation, to pray about what's going on in Eastern Europe. We do believe that the prayers of the righteous availeth much. We do believe that God listens to the prayers of his children. And so I would invite you, if you can be a part of that physically, to come. That's going to be on Friday the 12th at 6:45, and then on Saturday from 9 until 12. So if you can come and be a part of that, we invite you to come on out and be a part of that, of what's going on here at Bethel's Family about the prayer summit, because we really need as many people praying in that direction as possible. But here's another thing that I would like us to do on a very, very basic level. Everybody, I believe that you need to hold those who you put in office accountable. You need to hold them accountable. I know that people come around during election seasons. They're here for the election. They're gone right after. But we live in a democracy where we put people in office because of the votes that we cast for them. And we cast votes for these particular people based on things that they said that they were going to do for us. And make no mistake about it, this is not socialism, it's not communism. Our elected officials work for the people. We do not work for them. They don't just get to do whatever they want to do. We get to hold our elected officials accountable for the actions that they do. We get to do that in America, which is a very unique system. They don't have that in Russia. They don't have that in China. We have that here in America. It's called a democracy. Now, democracy is a pseudo term. I understand that. We can talk about that at a later time. I get that. But it's time that we begin to start holding our public officials and our elected officials accountable. This is what you said during your pre-election speech. Now that you're in, we need you to perform on what you said you were going to do. We need to start doing that. And as Christians, the age-old saying that I tell you all the time is, don't bury your head in the sand when it comes to politics. Get involved. Politics are a major part of the fight of the faith of Christians. It plays it from Genesis all the way to Revelation. God is not shy about political affiliation and the Christian. We have to be involved. Okay, we have to be involved. Know what you're talking about. Know what you're talking about. Be able to clearly articulate what you believe, because you'll help somebody by doing it. Don't run away from this. It's not anything worth running away, but just know what you know what you know. In Jesus' name. So I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us here on the set of Studio B, man. We are quickly approaching the 10,000 subscriber mark. And man, thank you so very much for doing that and subscribing and watching. But everybody, in Jesus' name, I really need you. We get a lot of likes. We get, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000 likes. That's wonderful. Praise God for it. But I need you to get in these comments. I need you to be like, Pastor Holman, you own it, or Pastor Holman, you way off base. I need you to get in those comments and talk to me through those comments, because I want to know what you guys are thinking. And remember, pastormdh@studiobpod.com is my personal email. If you feel like you got some things that you want to add to the set, go ahead and shoot me an email. I'll call you back. We'll talk about it. And we now have the ability to do Zoom as we are ironing out those kinks through our Zoom. So we can do that as well. So you don't have to be in Houston. You don't have to be in Texas. If you want to be a part and you think you got something of value to add, shoot me something via email and we'll make sure that we talk to you personally. And then possibly, if the Lord say the same, get you on the set. So everybody, we love you. We thank you so very much. Be encouraged, man. If God be for you, it's more than the entire world against you. Remember, when the enemy comes in like a flood, God will raise up a standard against them. Although it may seem like things and hope is lost, trust me, it is not. God still sits up on his throne. We love you. We bless you. And in Jesus' name, y'all be blessed until the next time.